does it feel like to die? When we're actually dying, when we're actually leaving this physical world, what does it feel like? Now, you might say, well, we won't know. We don't know until we're dying. But as a medium, well, I worked as a medium for around 25 years, and I don't do very much of it at all nowadays. I'm still a professional intuitive consultant, but I'm not doing much mediumship. Um, Obviously, I've tuned in to a lot of people. I've been asked on behalf of customers to make contact, do my best to make contact with certain loved ones who have passed. And so I've noticed that it's not the same experience for everybody by any stretch of the imagination. And, I'm assuming if you're watching this, then you are a believer in the um, our continued existence beyond physical death, in that our consciousness continues, our awareness continues. You may not. You may be a complete skeptic and you're only watching this so that you can poke holes in it, or you may be watching it because you're interested. But I can only tell you my experiences, and I can't tell you that you have to accept them and that this is, gospel. This is exactly how it is. But I'll just give you a couple of examples. I recently did produce a consultation for somebody who'd wanted to know about a grandparent. And so I do what I always do. Even if I'm working with the living or the deceased, I obviously I put my mental energy out there, and I usually work with my eyes closed because I'm watching here beyond the closed eyelids. See this space here beyond the closed eyelids? Well, what is it? Now, I'm doing that with my finger and I can actually see a shadow going round. So you can see some color, you can see shapes, but basically it's dark. Now, where does that darkness end? It doesn't end. It goes on and on. So to me, that's a vast, endless space. And to me, that's where the screen of the mind exists. Well, that's how it is with me. And so I look in that space because I can see better in that space. And so I will see an outline of the person with whom I am making a link. And obviously, it's not like they're there in flesh and blood because they no longer have a physical body, but I can see them on the screen of my mind. And they will choose how they present themselves. So sometimes they may present themselves as they were when they were fitter and healthier, before they got to the point of dying. Sometimes they showed themselves as they were just before they passed. Sometimes they'll do both. So then I've got to interpret everything I'm seeing and feeling. And it's the knowingness, it's the awareness. So sense is the most important thing. Vision is important, but the sense is the most important thing. How do I feel here? And there's a knowingness. You can know things, just know them. You know them in the middle of your head. So the communication will be carried out with, visually, with images, strongly with sense, and with a kind of knowingness in here. Now, it's not going to be completely perfect, as if that their grandparent is sitting right next to me in the flesh and we're just chatting. Well, it isn't with me. It may be like that with other people, but that's not how I work. And so it's pieces of information. It's little snippets, Excuse me, I'm just going to scratch my eye. And anyway, so this person interested me because he was showing. I was aware of him, like lots of people have chest problems, breathing problems before they die. That's really common, isn't it? And so I was aware of that. I could feel it. But then there was this really pleasant sense of him kind of being aware of what was going on in this world, physically around him, some bits of it. So it was like he was either in and out of sleep or maybe semi-conscious and aware of what was going on around him. But it was like almost in a dream state that he was then aware of himself in a different situation. He was aware of himself talking to people who had died, but not, as if he was talking through a medium, but he was talking to them. And he was going back to this awareness of where he was and some of his surroundings, hearing things, people's voices, people moving around, that kind of stuff. But then in this other sort of almost dreamlike state, he was somewhere else and he was talking to people. And then there was this kind of sense of disintegration. disintegration. And I was thinking, wow, I've never felt that before. So is that physical? Was it that it was a disintegration of what was going on within his body, in the run up to passing? And I felt there was probably some issue with blood or blood clots or that kind of thing within, blood flow, blood pressure, blood clots. But after a while, it clicked with me that because then the word fragmented, flashed across the screen of my mind. And so it was like it was fragmenting. And so whatever it is, whatever name you want to give it, that thing, the energy, the essence, whatever it is that connects the physical to the non-physical aspect of ourself, it was like that was fragmenting. And I'd never had it explained to me or shown to me in that way before. And then, this soul, this human soul, it felt like he hit the ground running, metaphorically speaking, as if when he passed, it felt like that he felt like he'd done his time in this world, and he was grateful for the life he'd had. Very down to earth, very typical working class male of his generation. That's reasonable and logic, isn't it? Down to earth. Probably would not have ever dreamed when he was alive of paying a penny to anybody to communicate with the dead. But I think he did have some kind of belief or openness to the idea that maybe, when you're dead, you're not dead. I think he had a degree of that. But it was surprising, given that kind of the way that he looked at life, that actually he embraced that transition very well and with great warmth, and was keen to show me that he'd recognized or associated with another soul who he used to know, a long time ago before he passed, who'd already died, a very, very tall guy, who used to kind of be a bit careful with his money. And there were other people. And so that was one experience. And, there've been others where I remember seeing one lady, this is how she showed it me on the screen of my mind. It was like she stepped out of her body, she stepped out of bed, her body was in bed, and she was looking down on her body, well, just looking at it and thinking, wow, I look a lot older than I thought I did. It was like, wow, look at me. I did look worn out. But as she was kind of leaving the body, it was like she was getting younger. She used to be quite a handsome lady, not, attractive, nice shaped legs and sort of, good figure. And she sort of started to, that's how she started to feel. So that was how she felt about herself, her self of awareness. So she wasn't feeling herself as the elderly lady lying in that bed with that very depleted body. She was aware of herself as a younger, stronger version of herself as she had been. And I found that really interesting. Gosh, there's been so many and I can't really remember them all. What I have noticed is as well that if somebody's been to me, had a mediumistic consultation with a loved one who'd passed, and just not long after they passed, then further down the line, maybe 6 months, a year, 2 years, tuning in again, it was as if they had evolved. It's as if they had changed. And so my belief, and it's all there in my book, are I can never remember the names of my own book, and they're ridiculous. Our Life Beyond, what the heck is it? Our Life Beyond Death, An Incredible Journey. Do you know, I'm so ashamed that I can't remember the titles of my own books. But anyway, there you go. Our Life Beyond Death, An Incredible Journey. And I talk about how the life force is so important. To me, I believe in the life force. Now, I know there's a lot of people have a nice twee version of life after death, and that's fine. That's their version of it. Each of us will have our own version, and they will like to think of life as being life beyond death as being exactly the same as their life before death, but without any problems or any issues or any worries. And they're all going to be, living close to the family and carrying on life. So there's all kinds of versions out there. you know, I remember reading somebody's book review, and somebody had left a very angry review because I didn't actually read the book. But apparently the author had said that people have jobs when they die in the afterlife. They have jobs. And this particular reviewer was enraged by that. And I can only imagine that they'd probably spent most of their life in probably a low paid job in which they were underappreciated. And the thought that, you know, they'd have to do the same thing again after they died was probably too much. And now I don't know where that belief came from, but that's that person's belief. You know, all I'm saying is, to me, the life force is an amazing thing. And if you look at people who have been, you know, they've been amazing in this world. They've risen from humble beginnings. They've been ambitious, hardworking, imaginative, and you know, they've embraced life and they've achieved a lot. They're not going to see life after death, or the experience of being in our non-physical self, is going to be relevant to who we are. We don't just suddenly go, you know, start at a level playing field. So if somebody has, you know, spent their entire life in the same town and done the same things day in, day out, year in, year out, and nothing wrong with that, if that makes a person happy, that's great. And they've really just plodded along, just taking one day at a time. Energetically speaking, they're not going to be experiencing, well, they're going to be experiencing their own life after death in exactly that way. So it depends upon who we are when we die, how we experience life. Well, who we are really at our core, you know. We might be old and we might be grumpy and we might be irritable, but that's not really who we are. That's just because we're old and we're ill. It's who we are at the core. And even a lot of people who are old and grumpy and irritable are still young at heart when they haven't got all that stuff to bear or to cope with. So it's who we are at heart when we leave this world, is how we're going to continue to experience the life beyond, or our experience of life beyond this world, in that way. And so, you know, I find these things so hard to explain. I would love to be able to narrow them down and narrow it down and explain it very articulately, but I maybe find it easier to do that in the written word maybe than the spoken word. So, and one more thing I remember is, I remember an elderly lady, and it is, I've definitely included that in my book, Our Life Beyond Death, I think, or is it in How the Dead Connect with Us? It's in one of them anyway. That she showed herself sitting very peacefully, very much at peace, in what looked like a small church or chapel. And it was beautiful. The pews were wooden and shiny and polished, and there was gorgeous light coming through stained glass windows. Well, the light was coming through gorgeous stained glass windows, and she was just sitting there very peacefully. And this was a lady who had very strong Christian beliefs before she passed, and that was her experience. Do you understand? So, yeah. So, and I don't believe, and I've talked about this in other videos, I do not believe that if our loved one dies suddenly under a traumatic circumstance, that they remain stuck or connected to the place at which they died. But it is a very popular belief. And I have covered that in my book, once again, Ghost Spirits and Troublesome Entities. I've talked about that there. I don't believe that is true, but I'm not dissing other people for believing it. However, I think that people who have lost somebody under traumatic circumstances would not want to believe that. And to me, there's no logic in it, but we are all entitled to our beliefs. And so I'm not saying that some souls don't revisit. Because, yeah, it is true. And I have had experience of this, where some human souls don't disconnect, if you like, from this world, from this physical experience. They kind of stay in a bit of a midland place. And I've definitely experienced that. And I've even picked up voices on audio recordings. Not often, but it has happened. And the most notable was one where it was in the days when, before you know, the internet took over. What I used to do is, for people that didn't live locally, they would send me a check in the post. I would do an audio recording for them on a cassette, an old cassette tape. Young people won't remember these, and record it on a tape recorder, and then I'd post it to them. And I'd done this one particular day, And I rewound it to the start, and then I had a habit of pressing the play button and just letting it kick in so I could make sure that it had started properly. And so I did that, rewound it, press play, and in that little gap between me pressing play and then speaking, a voice said, "Help me." And I went, whoa, okay. I rewound it and I replayed it and I replayed it and I replayed it. I got my children in. Bear in mind, my children have grown up around this, so you know, it's no biggie. It was no biggie to them, although they were very unsettled by it. And I asked them to listen. What do you think? And they said, yeah, that's yeah. It wasn't the TV in the background because, well, the TV was in another room anyway. I even scraped the chair on the floor just to see if I could emulate the same kind of noise, and I couldn't. And so what I did with that is I referred it to a friend of mine who had this group, and they would sit and meditate on things, and you know, and basically worked on helping this person to move on from wherever they were, you know. And there was one other story which I have mentioned before, but it's a really interesting one. There was a house that in the old days when I used to travel, I don't do it anymore. I don't travel out to see groups of people. I stopped doing that after about 23, 24 years. Couldn't do it anymore. And I'd gone to this lady's house. Anyway, she was a really dry, humid, very down to earth person, incredibly blunt and straight. And she said to me that there was something in her house. Now, I wasn't surprised by this because every time I went out, or 8 times out of 10 when I went out, somebody would tell me they had something, you know, there. Because as I say, the dimensions overlap. I mentioned this in another video. There's often stuff going on around us that, you know, we're not always aware of or partially aware of. And if it's not doing us any harm, just leave it alone. That's what I say. But anyway, so she said that there was definitely something there in the house. And she said she'd been lying on the couch facing inwards, you know, having a doze, and she felt an arm go round her, and she thought it was a boyfriend. So she turned round and there was nobody there, but she could feel almost like a hand on her, and she pushed it hard. She pushed it so hard she scratched her own tummy with a fingernail. And as she was telling me this, I could see it on the screen of my mind. A dark-haired man. I knew that he'd been a seafarer of some kind, and I knew that he'd had an alcohol problem, and he had blue eyes. He had blue eyes, very dark hair, which is unusual to have blue eyes and really dark hair, alcohol issue and seafaring. And so when she finished speaking, I just said, that was an impression. And she said, oh, right. I said, what? She said, well, the lady that owns this house, she said, actually, she said she now lives abroad, but she's recently been back and she came to visit me. And she said her son died, I think it was the year before or a couple of years earlier, but not long. And she said, she said all of her children had almost black hair, blue eyes. And she said this particular son who died, he used to be in the Merchant Navy and he was an alcoholic. And I thought, oh dear. So now, really what happened was I felt, oh no, something I missed out. When I was telling about the dark hair, the blue eyes, I said, I feel like he's looking for his mother. And I assumed that his mother must have died. But I said, you know what? I feel like he's looking for his mother. And then she told me this story. And then that the woman who owned the house had these, you know, children with the dark hair, blue eyes, and that had died. The boy had died. The young man had died. And I felt incredibly sad because from what I understood then, his mother was still alive, but that was his mother's house. She used to live in that house, and he probably didn't know. I don't know whether he knew before he died. Maybe, I don't know how long she'd lived in that house. But anyway, it'd been his mother's house, and he saw a female energy, maybe just aware of the female energy, and reached out to it. And that broke my heart. In fact, I'm feeling really tearful saying it now. And again, it wasn't I have never professed to be somebody who can go in and do the clearing. I feel a bit silly because I don't know enough about it, and I can't stand the drama. You know, there's too much drama in the spiritual and psychic world. There's too much. And so, but there are people who do know what they're doing. So I did ask her to please, you know, there was a spiritualist church up the road. So I said, I don't know whether that's a good place to go or start. I think I referred it to somebody. I'm pretty sure I referred it to my friend, actually, who I spoke about earlier, because I think I referred a few people to her. And I hope that they managed to help that soul, that human soul that for whatever reason had not transitioned, or not disconnected. Now, just going back to the older man I said, where I got a sense of fragmentation with him, the other strong sense I got from him was that actually he had no sentimentality about life on earth. There was no desire to be back there. He had an awareness of those souls who had been part of his experience. He had affection, but he was a very down-to-earth man, and he was perfectly okay with where he was, with what he was aware of, and he seemed to be busy. It seemed like, there were many souls that he was reconnecting with. And you'll notice I use the word souls because I don't use the word spirit. For us, I believe our spirit is the nature of us. We are not a spirit, that when we die, the only thing we take with us is our spirit. But that's for another video altogether. In this book, however, and I do say at the very beginning that for the sake of ease, I'm going to use the term spirit rather than soul, human soul. Yeah, so there you go. So yeah, so don't forget, if you want to hear more videos, then please subscribe. And also, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you hate it and you think I'm talking absolute rubbish, and you would like to see me tarred and feathered and march through the streets, then give me a thumbs down, because it's all good stuff. The thumbs up, the thumbs down, believe it or not, it's all good stuff. Even with my books on Amazon, you've got to have the negative reviews, because otherwise it's not authentic. We can't rely on our family and friends, for example, to buy our books and give us 5-star reviews. Well, we can at first. When we publish our first book, or we first publish a book, we'll hope that our family and friends will support us. Lots of times they don't, because they just, it's just you're not a real author. People think real authors are people that they don't know, right? I've known you for years. How are you an author? Do you know what I mean? You just write stuff. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but I think that is the way that people look at it. They go, give her a review, just give her a helping hand, So authentic reviews are really appreciated. So if you do buy books and you do read books, say, online, it's good to leave an honest review. Without being too nasty or making it personal. I've seen some, sometimes I'll find myself reading other people's reviews, good and bad. And honestly, they say going down the rabbit hole, don't they? I think that's the phrase, isn't it? And then you read all sorts of things. And sometimes it's not even your book, and you want to go around and shake that person till the teeth rattles in their head, It's not even your book. But yeah, but you've got to have thumbs up, thumbs down. You've got to have good reviews. You've got to have bad reviews. It's all grist for the mill. Yeah. Okay. Take care. Bye.